Active TV, seeing beyond. 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 Active TV, seeing beyond.
After the elections, and that many legal recourses are to be expected for those mail-in ballot, absentee ballots, and for recounts. So basically, buckle up for a few complicated days.
Complicated days indeed. This really difficult, tense part where it is close and pollsters predicted that it was going to be, and it's still to call in those really critical, potentially swing states. Can we might we be able to do that?
It's a bad night for pollsters, right? So after 2016, many pollsters actually completely their system of how to evaluate the Associated Press, for example, actually completely changed the way that it's been analyzing elections. So we were really hoping that this new methodology was more of an unfolds. And we were expecting more of a consensus for Biden and against Trump, which we're not seeing. We're not seeing a ringing endorsement for Biden. And this is all quite surprising because, to be frank, Trump wasn't a popular president. Which is usually a really good predictor for Republicans, knows Republican presidents were not re-elected, and they were not popular. Trump has been unpopular through his whole term. He's had that 4-4 average his entire term, but apparently this is not something that has a big. And we're saying that the structure of the American voting system, right, the Electoral College, also is playing a big role. We might expect popular vote to be and not here. The technical direct will play a big role in who is for this election.
Well, exactly as it did for Hillary Clinton on the popular vote, but Electoral College votes that she is in Joe Biden's home state of Delaware, and he's joins us now from Wilmington. So a brief, I don't know. Sorry. So Andy, just talk to us. It's a really difficult start to the night for Biden's. Now, a really big win in Arizona. So what's the reaction been from those guys in Biden's home territory?
Well, it is muted. It was about 4 hours ago that Joe Biden was here at the Chase Center, where the headquarters where the night has been, and he spoke. He told his supporters to keep the faith. But, you know, they set up a huge setup here at the Chase Center tonight, a big stage lighting, all kinds of things to make this a big event. But things went south after Joe Biden spoke to his supporters when it seemed like the vote is now suddenly much closer than maybe they were anticipating. They've torn down the stage, torn down this place. It's a ghost town around here now. Everyone has moved on So their supporters are basically back in their homes and their hotel rooms, just watching these results come in, hoping for the best. I think Al mentioned this, but I'll the campaign manager for Joe Biden released a statement just in the last few minutes, calling all of what Donald Trump said tonight just awful, calling it outrageous, unprecedented, and incorrect. Outrageous, he said, because it is an effort, he said, to suppress the democratic rights of American voters, and incorrect, he said, because the vote counting simply will not stop tonight. There is many more hours to go and many more days of counting to go, whether Donald Trump likes that or not. So we'll have to see. But really, everyone's in the wait-and-see mode. Obviously, Donald Trump wants to wrap this up, but Joe Biden is telling his supporters just...
Andy Rosen, thank you very much for speaking to us from Biden's home territory. Really appreciate it. Well, that's good analysis. We're joined now by Craig Peters, contributing editor at Quartz. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Earlier, I was talking to Aurora about this real difficulty that pollsters just didn't predict this close of a race at this stage. How's Trump been able to mobilise his support, particularly at his base, and is he outperforming what we predicted?
Rosie, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Please don't tell anyone. Polls do not vote. That's just the way it is. How did Trump do this? Well, Trump knows that blind political faith is based on issues that even the undereducated can understand. He picked at long festering sores, wounds deeper into the American psyche, the American electorate. Terror, racism, revenge, denial of science. These are his themes. Political science have a word for those kind of themes. It's called fascism. Now, Trump's utter incompetence and what many of his critics on both the right and the left say are constitutes has not hurt him, and that is perhaps the most remarkable takeaway of the election. So, and I think goes into answering your question. Why didn't the polls get this? Because polls don't ask those kind of questions.
Talk about what we know is happening, and that is challenges our Supreme Court into how is to replicate the process.
We have what's known as the inter-reg, that is 11 weeks from today and the January 20th, when the next president of the United States will be inaugurated. So there's a lot of time here. There's a lot to count the votes. There's a lot for saner minds to prevail here. And I have spoken with many election attorneys, and they have all said that they will find it very difficult for Trump to mount any effective complaint in the federal court system or even Supreme Court, because there is no chicanery here. People are counting votes, and votes are counted according to state law, not of Donald Trump sitting in the White House. Is it going to be difficult? Yeah. It's not a fight between the lawyers. And what Trump did a few hours ago by declaring victory has done nothing but gasoline to, the proverbial fire, this political fire that's burning in the United States for the past 4 years.
All of this is playing out before we've heard from some of these critical swing states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio. At what point are we going to get to a place where we can look with a bit more certainty as to who might win?
As soon as the fat lady sings, Rosie, it ain't over till it's over, as Yogi Berra once said. It's going to go on until all the votes are counted. And that's what you do in a democracy. You count all the votes that have been cast. This is not brain surgery. And what Donald Trump is trying to do is to get all of us to question the legitimacy of counting valid votes in a democracy. I'm not going to go in for it.
You're not. Many people will want to. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Craig Peters, contributing editor at Quartz. Now, here at Euronews for our very special coverage, we are continuing as people across the continent are eating to know who will be sitting in the White House. Of course, at this point, no, it's all hanging on a cliff edge. Well, while we await to find out who will policy for the next 4 years, there is another key milestone in US politics that's taking place. Today, the US will formally leave the Paris Climate Agreement. The Trump administration set out withdrawal in motion with a letter to the UN in 2017. The US will now join Iran and Turkey as the only major economies not to participate in the agreement. Well, let's just bring you up to speed as to where we are now. Welcome back to our sort of continuing coverage of the United States presidential election. Now, most critical part, the biggest development in the last couple of hours, without basis in fact. President Donald Trump has claimed an unsupported victory in the presidential election. The electoral mathematics just absolutely do not confirm this. He's also made unsubstantiated claims of widespread electoral fraud and said he's preparing to begin legal proceedings at Supreme Court. As it currently stands, he's already won the key battleground states of Florida, Ohio, and then 2016. It was crucial for him to retain that. Joe Biden has had a key game, winning Arizona, so far the only state to change hands since 2016. There are a number of states still in play, among them, as I mentioned, Michigan, Wisconsin, and perhaps most importantly, Pennsylvania, where we're looking at the race for the White House, bringing you insight, analysis, and perspective. Right now, though, let's take a look at protests that have been taking place. As no comment across Washington as the state of the race.
anytime, anywhere. All the news you want and the programs you like in one place. Connect to Euronews.com.
Hello, welcome back to our continuing coverage of the US presidential election here on Euronews. I'm Rosie Wright, and this is the story as it stands. The nail-biting race White House. Donald Trump is winning the key swing states in the presidential election that has made unsubstantiated claims of the wider vote.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country.
I'm Ray Suarez in Washington. I'll assess the returns and to understand the legal landscape on Election Day +1.
Democratic challenger Joe Biden is still hoping to secure enough electoral college votes to lead the White House administration. He's won safe Democratic seats and named the state of Arizona.
We believe we're on track for election.
I'm Oliver Whitfield-Miocic in the Euronews Results Hub, poring over the race. Both men to hit that vital number of 270 electoral college votes. At the moment, Joe Biden is just ahead of Donald Trump.
The media label post from president where he appears to claim victory. Here in the Cube, we'll bring you the very latest.
And it's not just about the White. Democrats are hoping to gain control of both Congress, but early indications suggest failing to make the necessary gains. Well, hello and welcome to our continuing coverage of the United States presidential election here on Euronews. Even though voting closed several hours ago, too early, who will become the next president of the United States? Without base in fact, President Donald Trump has claimed an unsupported victory in the presidential election. The electoral mathematics do not confirm this. He's also made unsubstantiated claims of widespread electoral fraud and said he's preparing to begin legal proceedings out of support. As it currently stands, he's already won the key battleground states of Florida, Iowa, and Iowa. He won in 2016, and retaining them was seen as crucial to his re-election bid. Joe Biden has made a key gain, winning Arizona, so far the only state to change hands since 2016. There are a number of states, among them the swing states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and most importantly, perhaps, Pennsylvania. Well, in this programme, we're looking at the race for the White House, bringing you insight, analysis, and perspective. And we're going to be joined by guests, correspondents, and contributors on both sides of the Atlantic as we dissect the results. What do they mean for the EU, the continent of Europe, and the wider world? Well, here is what President Trump inaccurately said at the White House this morning.
This is a major fraud in our nation. We want law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list. It's a very sad moment. To me, it's a very sad moment.
Well, what's the Philadelphia Electoral City Commissioner Lisa Deeley announced that the city's votes are still being counted. Midnight officials will give updated election counts on Wednesday morning.
In the morning, and the only difference is when we come back, we'll have a bigger number because we weren't able to give you a number tonight. But we should come out, and because we told you we would be out till we're out. Just so you know what's going on. It's continuing. There's been no stop counting. We are counting. We are going to continue to count.
Well, before the president made those, the Democratic nominee Joe Biden said he was confident of the road to victory.
And by the way, it's going to take votes. We're going to win Pennsylvania. I've been talking to folks in Philly, Allegheny County, Scranton, and they're really encouraged by the turnout and what they see. Look, you know, we could know the results as tomorrow morning, but it may take a little longer. As I said all along, it's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election.
Well, it's been a suspenseful night into the morning, as Joe Biden just said there. We don't actually know when we're going to have those final results, when this cliffhanger situation finally comes to conclusion. Let's speak to our results presenter who can give us a little bit more information. Is there on hand? Ollie, where are we now? Where have the Republicans got seats? Where have the Democrats? Where, in some cases, have they changed hands?
Thanks very much, Rosie. And everybody who is just tuning in, we need to reiterate that the magic number either candidate needs to reach is 270 electoral votes. You can see here that Joe Biden's on 238. It means he needs 32 in order to get the keys to the White House. For Donald Trump, it is 57, so he's got a little bit more work. So what are the potential routes for him to get to the White House? We've heard about the importance of Pennsylvania, so let's chart a path for each one. Let's take a southern route here. It would mean having to have Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Nevada, and Georgia for Donald. He will be elected for the next 4 years. And if we're going to include Pennsylvania for Joe Biden, he'd have to get that, as well as Michigan. But Joe Biden, because he's less votes that he needs to get to reach the presidency, he's got more options. Bring in the map and we can have a look at another way to do it. If he took Michigan as well as Georgia, both states with 60 electoral college votes each, that means he would get his 32. For Donald Trump, it would be a little bit harder. He'd have to get Wisconsin, Michigan. He'd have to get North Carolina as well as Georgia. But there you can see Pennsylvania isn't an end-all. But what is in those second scenarios that is important is northern Rust Belt states in the Midwest. Now let's take a look at Michigan. It used to be the home of automaking in the US. This is where Henry Ford set his eponymous car factories. And yet, we can see here, Donald Trump has got a 6% advantage, but election officials, like they are saying in Pennsylvania, they are not expecting the results to be released today because the counting is still ongoing. The same in Wisconsin. The production hub of the US, also in the Rust Belt, known for its... Here, it's a little bit of a tighter race. But cast your minds back to 2016, when the US President Donald Trump was promising he was going to make America great again, bring back jobs, bring back industry. Yes, some jobs were brought back, but industry hasn't recovered as much as what he'd like. The corona has knocked off some of those jobs. For China means that all of the rural areas up here, because this is also part of the Corn Belt, all of those areas have had tariffs slapped on them for soybeans. So this is crucial, and these are the states that the Democrats need to in order to bring back this, which is what they lost out on in 2016, and if they do not win back this time, it is going to be very difficult for them, but that could also be enough. Donald Trump is threatening to take things to courts to make sure that there's no more counting.
Ollie, thank you very much. Throughout the morning on those projections as they come in, really appreciate that from you. Let's go to the heart of this story, to Washington, where our correspondent Ray Suarez is. It's very dramatic. We've had the president making some wildly substantiated claims. Just talk through what they were. He said he's prepared to take this fight to the Supreme Court.
When speaking to a group of supporters at the White House, the president said a major fraud has been done against the American people. He went on to outline a scenario where ballots that are unaccounted for, possibly fraudulent, would be counted and counted and counted over the coming days until a desired result, his defeat, was reached. He basically told a group of supporters that he had already won, that the margins by which he was leading in states leading and trailing in states where he was trailing were temporary and not assailable when he was talking about places where he was ahead, but
Hey, manko Dank Natural Healthcare Complex a nanka minim sa yarasabia mu gu ahodo yade ben na etete wo se eye stroke enjojuye yade diabetes obi okasa na enka ewo nanum koko hepatitis brebuomu yade wonyina kidney problem ene enemu yade wonyina fibroid sexual weakness fe obi ojonso ana na yase anase ne bememu eye ne ya ene yade ahodo bebre Dank Natural Healthcare Complex yehwe ni nyina ye sanso massage therapy a ye ba be miamiao ama onipadua no agina brane samba se wo yade anase wonyade na betentre wo mpom titutumrika hwehwe yashoye ewon kran ye wotabora na matu ye ni Shell filling station no na edi enimhwe Kumasi nso ye wo patase ye Brembodama sport ene ye ni Shell filling station no edi enimhwe Dank ye adwuma na watwe nim nyina adwoda kopim efiada eye anopa no watwe ekopim anwumere nonum sanso na memrenda anopa no watwe ekopim awia nomiensa ena afi kwasiada awia donko ekopim anwumere nonsia Freying ewo 0244017556 ana 0266593330 ana 0553661585 ana 0501498026 Dank Healthcare Complex ahotofi Hey, manko Dank Natural Healthcare Complex nanka minim sa yarasabia mu gwahudu yade ben na etete wo se eye stroke enjojuye yade diabetes obi okasa na enka ewo nanum koko hepatitis brebuomu yade wonyina kidney problem ene enemu yade wonyina fibroid sexual weakness fe obi ojonso ana na yase anase ne bememu eye ne ya ene yade ahudu bebre Dank Natural Healthcare Complex yehwe ni nyina ye sanso massage therapy ye babi miamiao ama onipa duano agina brane sanso na ye wo gym center ye wo mfidi ni nyina bi wo ho a ye de ebo atrente nipa duano akwamu enti obi abetimi aba se wo yade anase wonyade na betrente wo mpom titutumrika hwehwe yasoye ewon kran ye wo tabora na matu ye ni Shell filling station no na edi enumhwe Kumasi nso ye wo patase ye Brembodama sport and ye ni Shell filling station no edi enumhwe Dank ye adwuma na watwe nim nyina adwoda kopim efiada eye anopa no watwe ekopim anwumere nonum sanso na memrenda anopa no watwe ekopim awia no miensa na afi kwasiada awia donko ekopim anwumere nonsia Fraying ewo 0244017556 and 0
would win a second for a term. He said Republicans are bigger, I suppose to mean, and call a big win. He also accused Democrats of like looking to safe haven as U.S. on. Later, Donald Trump.
Demean and divide, the more we will work to help.
He wants to protect us from the pandemic, from an economic fall, from racial unrest, from the ravages of climate change.
After the grueling election, how will the outcome impact Asia's future? U.S. post-election analysis forum special. Insight Thursday on CNA.
Every day, the finance through dramatic rise and falls. We'll track the biggest market movers and show you where the opportunities lie. Get the experts' take on the performance of indices. Plus all the analysis to help you understand forces driving global economies. The daily business news you need, only on CNA. Is brought to you by Xeon Corporation.
In 1997, more than 50,000 babies were born in Hong Kong. Now 23, they live in turbulent times.
出到嚟呢個社會發現原來唔係件事，即係同你以前書入邊學到嘅知識係完全唔同。
Hong Kong's handover kids reflect on dreams and destinies in attempts of change. Watch 23 on demand at CNA Asia.
This November, through the eyes of innovators, entrepreneurs, and cyber sensations, the city, exhibition fed while doing it in a sustainable way. Wizards of tech, from shape-shifting robots to artificial smart skin. Meet the brilliant minds on the quest to make the world better. Beyond the viral video, dogs, cats, babies, and overnight internet insights. How do viral videos affect our society, and what's their lasting impact? This November on CNA.
Today, is global. The other 90% comes from outside.
The world will hit almost 10 billion years. We will have this.
We throw away 30% of everything that we import.
You cannot take food for granted in Singapore. The more we understand how food is produced, the more we appreciate food.
Watch Feeding a City on demand at cna.asia.
The U.S. presidential over, neither candidate has enough electoral college victory. But Donald Trump says it's clear he's won and is prepared to take that claim to the Supreme Court. Now, at the same time, Joe Biden to be the winner in Arizona. This is the first time in 24 years that the state has won with the Democrats. Trump's claim of victory comes despite some states that still big in play, while Biden appears to have collected 224 electoral votes. Trump just behind with 230 votes. It's frenetic today as the U.S. presidential election results proved far closer than expected. Australia ended flat, recovering from a 1% slide over the session as stocks loosely tracked a rebound in U.S. futures. New Zealand's benchmark added 0.6%, led by real estate and healthcare firms. It's green all across the screen for the Nikkei, Topics and Kospi, but gains were capped as worries of contested election returned. Mainland markets are up, led by the banking sector. Investors appear to cheer on the suspension of any groups closely watched the mega dual listing. The Hang Seng edged lower by 0.2%. The stocks in Europe flipped after a pessimistic opening. UK's FTSE, Germany's DAX and France's CAC all pointing higher in the session. Between gains and losses comes as the race for the White House came too close to call. The reaction largely following the U.S. S&P 500 futures in a choppy session overnight. Money managers had bet on a clear Biden victory, anticipation of better trade ties between Europe and the U.S. And that boosted European equities earlier in the week. The bullish now returning. Taking a look at precious metals, both gold and silver turning negative. The yellow metal fell as the dollar strengthened after President Donald Trump snatched an early lead in the key state of Florida. Largely viewed as a safe haven asset, the gold had gained about 25% so far this year on the back of unprecedented global stimulus amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Oil prices had gains after industry showed crude inventories in the U.S. dropped sharply. Dealers noted a returned Republican administration would likely be more positive for the oil industry. Democrats are known to favor renewable energy. U.S. WTI up more than 2% above $38 a barrel, and crude now trading above 40. Well, this nail-biter of election left markets whipsawed while bonds and the dollar rose. Investors had expected that a Biden victory would ease political risk and boost fiscal stimulus, but the mood shifted dramatically when Trump snagged Florida. We spoke to OCBC's Bank William Wiranto earlier.
On the equity front, we have seen good performance in terms of futures going up, broadly speaking, because of his corporate tax cut platform, etc. Overall, I think volatility is likely to pick up precisely not just because the election outcome is unknown, but whether supporters on both sides would readily accept the results will remain a big unknown for a while. And beyond that, the machinations of the democratic process in the U.S. are complicated, and we might not know how the actual for quite a while, not just in terms of voting delays or not, but also in terms of whether the electoral college votes would go the way that they're intended to. We don't know until the middle of December, for that matter, for instance.
Well, let's go deeper into President Trump's declaration that he's prepared to go to the Supreme Court if necessary after claiming victory in the U.S. election. Joined by Professor Lawrence Douglas from Amherst College in Massachusetts. Welcome, Professor. I just want to ask you, first of all, what is the legal basis for this call by Trump to stop vote counting?
Well, I wish there actually were a legal basis for such a count. Such a call. There really isn't one. The president does not have authority to do so. We're talking about millions of votes that remain to be counted, which have been legally cast. So, opportunities for him to litigate if you're able to prove, for example, that votes were improperly counted. There's really no legal basis for him whatsoever to simply try to disenfranchise millions of people who have legally cast votes.
So what now, Professor? How does this matter end up in the Supreme Court from where we are now?
Well, it doesn't necessarily end up in the Supreme Court. I mean, the way it could end up in the Supreme Court again is if let's say the margins separating Trump and Biden in a key swing state such as Pennsylvania, if the margins separating the two depend on ballots that, let's say, were submitted after the statutory submission in Virginia, that would be an opportunity for Trump to bring a suit saying those ballots that were submitted tardily need to be guarded. And we already saw that the Supreme Court, for example, accepted the extension of Pennsylvania's date by which these mail-in ballots need to be received by state officials. So we also saw that the Supreme Court expressed a willingness to revisit that after agreeing to the extension of the. So it is possible that the matter would land in the hands of the Supreme Court, but there's certainly no guarantee that the court would be responsible for deciding or resolving this electoral dispute.
Yeah, and with Pennsylvania, you bring up an interesting point because it does play in difference, doesn't it? Potentially.
Yes, precisely. Because we have, we really don't have a nationalized election system. And so each state, for example, has different deadlines by which, let's say, mail-in ballots need to be received by state officials in order for them to count. And also the way states go about counting. And this is something that can be bewildering to some of your viewers. But for example, there's some states like Colorado, which began counting their mail-in ballots the moment they arrived in state headquarters, whereas Pennsylvania didn't even begin the count of mail-in ballots until yesterday, which is one of the reasons why there are alone ballots that are still be counted. And we should bear in mind those mail-in ballots will break heavily in Joe Biden's favor.
Mm. Now, just a final question, Professor. Any surprise to you that the race is actually this close to call?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's surprising. I think it's troubling. I think one of the scenarios that I worried about, and I wasn't alone in this, but I worried that the election would end up turning on the count of ballots in, let's say, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and that the president would prematurely declare victory before those ballots had been counted. And unfortunately, what looks like a trouble has come to pass.
Well, just one more question. Biden's come to say he feels that he's in a confident position, and obviously what Trump has said. What do they say about the state of mind within the party?
Well, again, I think it's not just in the parties. I think it's for America as a whole that it is crucial to be patient as the process plays itself out. That is, an election is not a process, and the process until legally counted. And so I think it's very important for bankers to push back against Trump's, in a sense, very declaration of victory.
We'll leave it there for now, but thank you so much for us from Amherst College in Massachusetts. Well, look at some other day, and Malaysia's Senior Minister hints at new features for the country's orders COVID-19. Now, no details of the new standard so far, but Sabri Yaakob said the proposals have been at a special National Security Council meeting by Prime Minister Wahid Yassin. Mr. Ismail said they are fine-tuning the proposal ahead of future. These procedures may be stricter than what is currently in place as Malaysia looks to curb the spread of the pandemic. Types of movement control layer in the district orders. India, meanwhile, is reporting about 40,000 new coronavirus infections. Currently, it has a second cases of COVID-19 in the world. Follows the United States with 8.8 million confirmed cases. Its total tally, but the spread has declined since September. But in straight weeks, India has than 15 cases a day. Still, infections are spiking in some parts of the country. These areas include New Delhi, the southern state of Kerala, and West Bengal. As celebrates Karva Chauth, authorities warn of possible surge during the festival season. Look to wear masks and maintain social distancing. Italy's Prime Minister has signed a decree to enforce a nationwide night curfew tomorrow at 10 in the evening. The curfew will run from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. and it is part of a slew of new antivirus measures the Prime Minister has implemented. But the restrictions depend on how severe the infections are in the region, based on a three-tier system of red, orange, and green. It means that a blanket nationwide lockdown, such as those adopted by France, will probably not be adopted. Among the new measures, shopping malls will be shut on weekends, except for small shops like food and pharmacies. Public transport will be limited to 50% of the capacity. Singapore, meanwhile, has reported 7 new COVID-19 cases. National tally now stands at 1,036. 5 cases are reported, 5th consecutive day with no community cases. The South Korea's military has detained a North Korean man after he crossed the heavily fortified border into the south. Now the man was spotted crossing barbed wire fences and into the eastern end of the demilitarized zone. An investigation into the possible defection has been. The incident comes as South Korea resumed tours to the DMZ, where it has as a view of key inter-Korean events. Tours were suspended last October due to an outbreak of the deadly African swine fever in the north and concerns over COVID-19. Coming up, the Korean Peninsula, among Asian countries with their eye on the result of the U.S. election, and we will also find out what the impact of a Trump or Biden presidency may have on the Indonesian.
We import 90% of everything that we consume on this little island.
There's a whole army of people working the whole country fed.
Feeding a City, Monday on CNA.
This November, through the eyes of innovators, entrepreneurs.
Hey, manko Dank Natural Healthcare Complex nanka minimsa yarasabia mu gwahudu yade ben na etitewo se eye stroke enjojuye yade diabetes obi okasa na enka ewo nanum koko hepatitis brebuomu yade wonyina kidney problem ene enemu yade wonyina fibroid sexual weakness fe obi ojonso ana na yase anase ne bememu eye ne ya ene yade ahudu bebre Dank Natural Healthcare Complex yehwani nyina yesanso massage therapy ye babi miemiao ama onipa duano agina brane sanso na ye wo gym center ye wo mfidi ni nyina bi wo ho a ye de ebo atrente ni paduano akwamu enti obi abetimi aba se wo yade anase wonyade na betrente wo mpom titutumrika hwehwe yasoye e won kran ye wo tabora na matu ye ni Shell filling station no na edi enimhwe Kumasi nso ye wo patase ye Brembodaman sport and ye ni Shell filling station no edi enimhwe Dank ye adwuma na watwe nim nyina ejoda kopim efiada eye anopa no watwe ekopim anwumere nonum sanso na memrenda anopa no watwe ekopim ewia no miensa na afi kwasiada awia donko ekopim anwumere nonsia Fraying was 0244 017556 and 0266 593330 and 0553 661585 and 0501 498026. Dank Healthcare Complex and Hotofi 7556 and 0266 593330 and 0553 661585 and 0501 498026. Dank Healthcare Complex and Hotofi. Hey, manko dank natural healthcare complex a nanka minim sa yarasabia mu gwahodo yade ben na etete wo se eye stroke enjojuye yade diabetes obi okasa na enka ewo nanum koko hepatitis brebuomu yade wonyina kidney problem ene enemu yade wonyina fibroid sexual weakness fe obi ojonso ana na yase anase ne bemem eye ne ya ene yade ahodo bebre dank natural healthcare complex yehwe ni nyina ye sanso massage therapy a ye babi miamiao ama oni pedua no agina brane sanso na ye wo gym center ye wo mfidie ni nyina bi wo ho a ye de ebo atrente ni pedua no akwamu enti obi abetimi aba se wo yade anase wonyade na betrente wo mpom titutumrika hwehwe yahweye ewon kran ye wo tabora na matu ye ni Shell filling station no na edi enimhwe Kumasi nso ye wo patase ye adwuma na wotwe no nyina ejoda kopim efiada eye anopa no wotwe ekopim anwumere nonum sanso na memrenda anopa no wotwe ekopim ewia no miensa na afi kwasiada awia donko ekopim anwumere nonsia Fraying ewo 0244017556 and 0266593330 and 0553661585 and 0501498026 Dank Healthcare Complex Ahotofi. Hey, manko Dank Natural Healthcare Complex nanka minim sa yarasabia mu gwahodo yade Hey, manko dank natural healthcare complex nanka minimsa yarasabia mu gwahudu yade ben na etitewo se eye stroke enjojuye yade diabetes obi okasa na enka ewo nanum koko hepatitis brebuomu yade wonyina kidney problem ene enemu yade wonyina fibroid sexual weakness fe obi ojonso ana na yase anase ne bememu eye ne ya ene yade ahudu bebre da nyina bi wo ho a yade ebo atrenten ni padua no akwamu enti obi abetimi aba se wo yade anase wonyade na betrenten wo mpom titutumrika hwehwe yasoye ewon kran ye wotabora na matu ye ni Shell filling station no na edi enimhwe Kumasi nso ye wo patase ye Brembodaman sport ene ye ni Shell filling station no edi enimhwe dank ye adwuma na wotwe no nyina ejoda kopim efiada eye anopa no wotwe ekopim anwumere nonum sanso na memrenda anopa no wotwe ekopim ewia nomiensa na afi kwasiada awia donko ekopim anwumere nonsia Fraying was 0244-017556 and now 0266-593330 and now 0553-661585 and now 0501-498026. Dank Healthcare Complex and Hotofi. Eye stroke enjojuye yade diabetes obi okasa na enka ewo nanum koko hepatitis brebuomu yade wonyina kidney problem ene enemu yade wonyina fibroid
that is growing, threatening to take it to the courts and calling foul of the election, something he then repeated when it came to the address that he gave in the White House.
Yeah, he did tweet actually earlier on, and Twitter were not particularly happy with the content. They say this tweet is disputed and might be misleading about an election or other civic process. That on a tweet from the President of the United States. However, the President went on to say, we are up big, but they are trying to steal the election. We will never let them. Votes cannot be cast after the polls are closed. Now, not really sure how to interpret that. When he says votes can't be cast once after the polls are closed, of course they can if it is a ballot that is a postal ballot that can be counted up until the 12th of November in some states. So he's wrong to say that.
Yes, he is. I think some of these tweets are written in haste, incidentally, because there was a few misspellings in the early ones. Under postal voting rules in some states, as long as they are postmarked November 3rd, i.e. polling day, they are able to still arrive at the election count some days afterwards and still be counted. In terms of the afterwards, does vary state by state, but typically 3 days afterwards. So you could have someone, in theory, who put a tick across in their box and post a ballot yesterday, took it to the post office, put it in the post office, it's postmarked, post-stamped November the 3rd, but it might not arrive to be counted for another day or two, but it will still count. And that is what is annoying Donald Trump. That is what is worrying Donald Trump. Why? Because it tends to be Democratic supporters who engage in postal balloting. And that is why, as I was saying earlier, you'll see probably a slightly greater shift towards the Democrats as the hours go on and these last few thousand votes are counted in state by state.
More than 100 million people cast their votes before election day, and that was because it was thought that many of them were concerned about coronavirus and contracting coronavirus in a polling booth or whatever. But when the exit polls came out last night, it appears that people are much more concerned about the economy than they are about COVID-19.
I think the two are sort of entwined in the effect that the COVID pandemic has had on the economy. I was in Washington and New York in February, March, April, when unemployment was going in Great Depression levels, when the country was locked down, when businesses were closing, unable to reopen. There is no doubt that the current economic status of the United States of America is entirely wrapped up in what's going on with the health pandemic. Trump boasts that he built the greatest American economy there ever has been. There is some truth in that, but it's always how you interpret the figures. The first 3 years of his presidency saw annual growth of around 2.5%, but the last 3 years of Obama's presidency to precede it saw annual growth of about 2.3%. So, was it Donald Trump, or did he take on board and inherit are a success. You know, you decide. But the point is that the economy stupid, is always front and centre of any US election and the decision-making of the voters. But how much did COVID have to do with that?
Okay. It's a beautiful day here in Washington. We thought potentially we would be telling you who is going to be the next president of the United States of America. We are very far from that this morning. As the sun rises over the White House, have another look. It's an absolutely glorious sight. Probably the president is having a little rest. He was up in the early hours of this morning, probably hadn't gone to bed, saying that he felt that the election was being stolen from him, that he wanted the count in Pennsylvania particularly to stop for now, and that he wanted the Supreme Court to get involved. That's because it is incredibly tight. This is how it's looking at the moment. Remember that the Electoral College vote number that you need to get to is 270. That is the way that it's looking at the moment. 224 for Biden, 213 for Trump, but he just needs a few of those big number states to go his way, and he will have the keys to the White House for the next 4 years. Adam Bolton coming up next. Beautiful view of the White House this morning. We'll see you soon.
Well, good afternoon from Washington, D.C. It's still morning here, 7 a.m., and it's still not clear who's going to be the next American president. All the signs are that the result is going to go to the wire, with the outcome possibly decided in the Supreme Court. Donald Trump has already claimed victory and vowed to drag the U.S. election into the courts. His claim came without evidence that there's fraud on the American nation.
This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be in the proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Joe Biden says it's not done yet. He's ready to fight a legal challenge as the election result remains on a knife edge. It may well come down to Pennsylvania. Donald Trump is making up ground in key swing states. Well, good afternoon from Washington, D.C., where the result of the presidential election is still too close to call, 12 hours after the polling stopped, and here on the East Coast. Georgia and North Carolina are still counting and open. There's better news for the Democrat in Arizona. There, Joe Biden is ahead in the traditionally Republican state, and he's also projected to win in Minnesota. Well, the Democratic candidate, Joe Biden, said he was ready to fight any legal challenge against what he said was a naked effort to take away democratic rights. In a statement, the Biden campaign said, the president's statement tonight about trying to shut down the counting of duly cast ballots was outrageous, unprecedented, and incorrect. It was outrageous because it's a naked effort to take away the democratic right of American citizens. If the president makes good on his threat to go to court to try to prevent the proper tabulation of votes, we have legal teams standing by, ready to deploy to resist that effort, and they will prevail. Well, Joe Biden and his vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, will stand for the right of all Americans to have their votes counted. No matter who they voted for, we remain confident that when that process is completed, Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. But politics continues in the UK, and we're going to break away from election coverage for a bit now to go back to the UK, with England about to head into a second national lockdown. It's Prime Minister's Questions with Mr Johnson on his feet.
That this House has to face tonight. I think I speak for many honourable members across this House when I say I don't think any government would want to impose these measures lightly, or any parliament would want to impose these measures lightly on the people of this country. And it was always right, Mr Speaker, to pursue a local and a regional approach, as our scientific advisers said. And I'll tell you why, Mr Speaker, because that approach, that regional approach, actually was showing signs of working and still is showing signs of working. It did get the R down, the transmission rate down lower than it would otherwise have been, Mr Speaker. But we have to face the reality that, in common with many other countries in this part of the world, we are now facing a surge in that virus, which this House has to now tackle with the measures we've outlined. They will expire on December the 2nd. I hope very much the members opposite will support them tonight.
Mr Speaker, I'm sure nobody wants a lot of question time. This decision has been taken a few weeks ago. There's a circuit break. It could have been done for 2 to 3 weeks. All closed over half. Now, Prime Minister's proposed lockdown will be for at least 4 weeks. That means businesses will be closed for longer and in the critical run-up to Christmas. Does the Prime Minister understand the economic cost of his delay in acting?
Mr Speaker, it is precisely because we understand the economic cost, and it's precisely because we understand the social, the psychological damage of lockdowns that it was right, Mr Speaker, to go for the local and the regional solution that was supported by, and indeed supported by many members, indeed I think by the right honourable gentleman, as long as it was useful to him for a while. That was the right approach. But what I can tell, Mr Speaker, is that at the expiry of this period on December the 2nd, by then, as I said in answer to my honourable friend earlier on, we will be rolling out across this country new types of testing on a scale never seen before, beginning this week, as I've said, in Liverpool. Enables us to detect asymptomatic cases, Mr Speaker, and that's crucial because 70% of the transmission is taking place, as the House knows, between people who have no symptoms. And that will enable us to find new ways on a mass scale to break the chains of transmission. I want to thank particularly the Labour leadership of Liverpool for their cooperation, a manner of cooperation that I commend to the benches opposite.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's delay in acting is a huge failure of leadership. It is no good saying that there was support for the tier system. As he well knows, I looked at the evidence and made a decision 3 weeks ago that the right thing was for a circuit break. And I don't buy the argument, I don't think anybody does, that the facts suddenly changed this weekend. The direction of travel and the number of infections, hospital admissions and tragically deaths have been clear for weeks. But we are where we are. Millions of people across the country are really concerned about the restrictions that will come to force at midnight tonight. And I accept that we've all got a duty to pull together and try to make this lockdown work. So I just want to ask some basic and direct questions on behalf of those millions of people. First, will the lockdown end on the 2nd of December, come what may, or will it depend on the circumstances at the time? People need to know that.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the support that he's now offering, and I can answer him very simply. As the House knows, and as I informed him repeatedly on Monday, these measures, these autumn measures to combat the surge, will expire automatically, Mr. Speaker, on December the 2nd, and we will then, I hope very much, be able to get this country going again, to get businesses, to get shops open again in the run-up to Christmas. But that depends on us all doing our bit now to make sure that we get the R done. I've no doubt that we can, and that we'll be able to go forward from December the 2nd with a very, very different approach. But, of course, it will be up to the House of Commons to decide thereafter what to do.
Mr. Speaker, I accept there will be a vote in the House. That doesn't tell us anything. That's the process. But I want to press the Prime Minister. Is he saying that by the 2nd of December, the R rate, the infection rate, has not come below 1, and therefore on the 2nd of December, the infection rate is still rising on the 2nd of December? Is he saying that come what may, we will come out of lockdown with infection rates going up on the 2nd of December? That doesn't seem sensible to me.
Mr. Speaker, it is thanks to the efforts of the British people that the R is now currently only just above 1 as it is. And we are doing the right and the prudent thing at the right time to get that infection rate down. And these measures, as I've said repeatedly to the House, Mr. Speaker, will expire on the 2nd of December. If he's now saying he wants to expand, protract them beyond the 2nd of December, then perhaps he should make his position clear.
I just want some basic honesty, and this is serious. If the infection rate, we've got to look the public in the eye. If the infection rate is still going up on the 2nd of December, it is madness to come out of the system back to the tiered system when we know the one thing the tiered system can't cope with is an R rate above 1. That's the basic point. We can come back to it on the 2nd of December, as we always do, Mr. Speaker, but that's the point I'm making. The one thing we know a circuit break or lockdown does do is to buy time. And the Prime Minister needs to use that time to fix, test and trace. And I know he'll talk about the capacity of 500,000, what's going on in Liverpool is world-beating, etc. But we've been going round and round in circles on this. Mr. Speaker, the latest figures show that 113,000 contacts were not even reached, and that's just in 1 week. Only 20% of those who should be isolating are doing so, and the majority of people still don't get results in 24 hours. So can the Prime Minister give a straight answer? What's he going to do in the next 4 weeks to fix this? Because if he doesn't, we'll be back here again.
Mr. Speaker, with greatest respect to the right honourable gentleman who has stood up and said that I will brag about NHS test and trace and their achievement of 500,000, a target of capacity of 500,000. You know, I think I'm perfectly willing to accept the failings of NHS test and trace, Mr. Speaker. Of course I am. And of course I take full responsibility for the frustrations people have experienced with that system. But to go from 3,000 tests a day, 2,000 tests a day, to 500,000 is a quite remarkable feat. It's the biggest diagnostics exercise this country has ever carried out. And, Mr. Speaker, they are helping to drive down the R. They are doing, in my view, an absolutely invaluable job, whatever the difficulties they face. What we now need to do is to come together as a nation, brief hand, put aside party political wrangling and point scoring, and work together, as I think he will tonight, work together to support this package, to get the R down and allow us to go forward in a different way with the mass testing that I've outlined from December the 2nd.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister must see that if 4 out of 10 of those that should be contacted are not being contacted, we've got a problem in the system that needs to be fixed in the next 4 weeks. Finally, I want to ask about care homes, which of course were hit so badly in the first wave of this pandemic. And can I pay tribute, Mr. Speaker, to all those working in care homes who've given such dedication and commitment in the toughest of circumstances, and we owe it to them not to repeat the mistakes of the first wave. But, Prime Minister, as we face the second wave, there's an increasing concern about the emotional well-being of those in care homes and their families if all visits are stopped. It must be possible to find a way, perhaps a dedicated family member scheme of some sort, to allow some safe visits to alleviate the huge fears of isolation and despair across the coming months. Will the Prime Minister work cross-party to find a scheme that will work for those in care and their families?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the new guidance on care homes and visiting relatives safely, because the point he makes is incredibly important, is going to be announced today to try to strike the right balance between people's real need to see their loved ones and obviously the risk of spreading the disease in care homes. We're going to be publishing some guidance about how that can be done today. And I'm grateful to his offer to work collaboratively, but I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that the House will generally have noted that he has used this crisis as an opportunity to make political capital, to have what I think a shadow spokesman called a good crisis. A good crisis, Mr. Speaker. Well, can I commend a different approach? Because he's attacked the government's strategy. Can I commend a different approach? Because the former Labour leader, the Right Honourable former member for Sedgefield, who is not as fashionable on those benches as he once was or should be, has written a good, not with all of them, Mr. Speaker, that's from the front bench, not with all of them. He's written a good piece in today's Daily Mail, Mr. Speaker, in which he broadly supports this government's strategy, praising UK drugs companies for what they're doing, supporting our search for a vaccine, and supporting mass testing in Liverpool, which he deprecates, Mr. Speaker. And I think what he should do is actually take a leaf out of the Blair book, Mr. Speaker. And by the way, I can tell him that Tony Blair would not have spent 4 years in the same shadow cabinet as Jeremy Corbyn, standing shoulder to shoulder with him.
Nick Fletcher.
Mr. Speaker, I understand the position the government is in today, and although this is desperately hard for people and businesses, I agree that it was the right decision. However, once we are through this period, I believe it is business that will restore the economy. Therefore, does my right honourable friend agree with me that easing congestion in the south east with the border control point in Don Valley would help trade flow through the country and level up the north following the transition period?
Prime Minister. Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I can tell him that the Department of Transport is already engaged on this matter, and I'm sure would be happy to meet him and representatives from the iPort that he describes.
Right, let us head up to the leader of the SNP up in Scotland with Ian Blackford. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to take the opportunity to send my best wishes to our friends in the US during this anxious time. Claimed an unsupported victory and major fraud with millions of legitimate ballots left to count, and I hope the Prime Minister will join me in condemning his actions this morning. Mr. Speaker, on Monday the Prime Minister agreed access to the furlough scheme at 80% for Scotland if restrictions require it. Subsequently, a number of his ministers have rolled back on that promise, and the Scottish Government have not received any detail on what the commitment means in practice. Today is the Prime Minister's opportunity to clear up this mess of his own government's making. Will Scotland receive full 80% furlough and self-employed payments, on current eligibility whenever it is requested by the Scottish Government in the months ahead?
Well, I gave a commitment, then I in no way budge from that commitment. Furlough is a UK-wide scheme. It's helped save, I think, about 10 million jobs in this country, including about 1 million in Scotland, Mr. Speaker.
Ian Blackford.
Well, of course, what the Prime Minister said on Monday is that if the devolved administrations asked for it, that it would be granted. That was a direct answer that he gave to a question. So can I ask whether, Mr. Speaker, the Scottish Government, who've been waiting for clarity on whether Scotland will receive additional as a result of increased spending from English local government, and is there also no clarity on whether the unlimited payments for business support in England will be made available on a similar demand-like basis? Will the Prime Minister clarify these 2 points now and commit to confirm in writing to the Scottish Government today that the access to the furlough scheme will be there if they need it?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think perhaps the most efficient thing I can imagine, Mr. Speaker, about all the support and all provisions that we're making for this latest phase to tackle the autumn surge of coronavirus tomorrow. What I can tell him, just to repeat the points that I've made on Barnett Consequential, so there's already been 7.2 billion gone to help, 7.2 billion, I should say, for Scotland. And look, Mr. Speaker, we're going to support people in Scotland and throughout the UK during this crisis.
Stuart Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister recognise the importance of places of worship to my constituents in Wolverhampton and the rest of the country? And does he agree they should open as soon as practically possible? And will he commend all the work that has been done in these places to make them COVID secure?
If every vote is counted in the US election, it is likely that Joe Biden will be the victor. The Prime Minister does have a major challenge to build relationships to any incoming administration. So therefore, in light of Joe Biden's entirely correct analysis of the impact on the Good Friday Agreement of the Internal Market Bill, how quickly is the Prime Minister going to recognise the inevitable and remove those clauses from the bill?
Mr. Speaker, the UK Internal Market Bill, which has cross-party support, is a vital part of the armature, the skeletal structure of the whole UK economy as we leave the European Union, and it ensures that goods placed on market, services are available throughout the UK on the same terms. It's absolutely vital for our country. And
does my friend agree with me that here in the UK we must redouble our support for anti-extremism programmes like PREVENT?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, my right is absolutely right, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with France, as I've told President Macron, against this abominable ideology, and together we will defeat it, Mr. Speaker.
Gareth Thomas.
I hope, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor now regret their decision not to extend community groups, councils and into businesses who stepped up to stop our nation's children going hungry last week. So will the Prime Minister now commit to do the right thing at Christmas and extend free school meals to cover that period too?
Yes, I do indeed congratulate all the voluntary organisations. I'm proud that have stepped on. I'm proud that this government has also helped to fund them to the tune of billions of pounds, and other, not just the 1 billion going to help councils. Mr. Speaker, this government will ensure any inattention or inactivity by government. And never forget, Mr. Speaker, that it was a Conservative government that instituted free schools for 5, 6 and 7-year-olds after all the years Labour were in power.
Speaker, the Prime Minister will remember new electric London taxi being made in my constituency, and he'll be pleased to hear that the companies this week started production of a van. But this year has been a tough one for the automotive sector, with manufacturing output at its lowest level for 25 years. It would benefit massively from the certainty of knowing that components and vehicles will be able to move free of tariffs between the UK and countries of the European Union from the new year. Can he provide good news about concluding a deal with the EU to the sector, its workers and their families?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do indeed believe that such a deal would be massively in the interests of our EU friends and partners as well as anybody else. It is, of course, up to them. What I can tell him is that we are supporting green technology of all kinds, Mr. Speaker, particularly hybrid and battery vehicles, and we've just put another £49 million into grants for exactly the kind of vehicles that he and I have inspected and driven together, so that this country can bounce back greener, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government, with Refuge reporting a 50% increase in their use of a hotline. Meanwhile, there's risks by home working to many people facing domestic abuse. Domestic abuse has no borders, so can the Prime Minister ensure that the UK government, before a second English lockdown begins, produces a well-resourced plan for addressing domestic abuse? And will he join me and South Wales Police and members from across this House in himself becoming a member of the Employers' Initiative on Domestic Abuse to send a clear signal that no one should have to live with violence in their homes?
Mr. Speaker, he's entirely right in the sense that although the absolute numbers haven't gone up perhaps in the way that we'd feared, what we're unquestionably seeing is repeat victimisation in domestic contexts. It is intolerable. As the House knows, we've set up helplines to tackle it. We're investing in refuges, in IDVAs and independent domestic violence advisors. It is absolutely crucial that we tackle the scourge of domestic abuse and that we also deal with the consequences, the mental health consequences for the victims. And that's why we're investing massively in mental health and mental health charities as well.
Mr. Speaker, an independent study published recently suggests that the writing ability of Year 7 pupils is some 22 months behind expectations. And my right honourable friend will know that it is the life chances of the most disadvantaged that are hit hardest when schools close. These are the very children, quite rightly, that we have said are an absolute priority for this government. So can I ask my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, for an assurance that first, we will do whatever it takes to make up for lost ground, and second, we will never again contemplate closing our schools?
I thank my right honourable friend, and he's completely right about the paramount importance of keeping our schools open. But what I will also say to him is that out of this crisis has been born at least one, I think, potentially innovative idea that can really help exactly the types of kids, pupils that he's talking about. And that is one-on-one tutoring of the kind that we've been able to support with our catch-up premiums and our national tutoring programme. And I want to see, as we go forward, as we come out of this pandemic, I want to see us keeping up with one-on-one tutoring, because I believe it can make a huge difference to the confidence of children and to their academic attainment.
Sam Terry. Speaker, let me put on record my congratulations on your first year in office, and thanks to so many young MPs you've given across in the past year. Mr. Speaker, SAGE recommended a circuit breaker over 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago. The Prime Minister has clearly not listened to scientific or medical advice for more than 6 weeks. What will the Prime Minister say to the 12,000 people's families who will die by Christmas, that's been forecast by SAGE? What will you say to Mr. Prime Minister?
I listen to a huge scientific advice, and indeed there are eminent scientists and epidemiologists who say that you shouldn't do any kind of lockdowns, any kind of measures like this at all. David Nabarro, who I esteem greatly, of the World Health Organization, for instance. But you have to take a balanced decision. You have to strike a judgment about when the right moment is. You have to balance the effect. He talks about effects on people's lives. You have to strike make a balanced judgment about the effects on people's mental health, on their livelihoods, on their prospects, the prospects of young people, and the importance of saving lives and protecting our economics. And that's the balance we're trying to strike tonight. I hope you will support it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a few short weeks, we end the transition period with the European Union. May I ask the Prime Minister to confirm that the transition team will endeavour to keep Dover clear from traffic gridlock, and that work will continue at pace on the proposed upgrade to the A2 between Whitfield and Dover's Eastern Docks?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend, and I congratulate her on her campaign for the people of Dover, and I can tell her that Highways England is now, I think thanks to her lobbying, developing plans to improve Brenley Corner Junction and access into Dover along the remaining single carriageway sections of the A2 from Lyddon, Mr. Speaker.
Heading up to Scotland with Carol Monaghan. Carol Monaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I asked the Prime Minister on Monday whether furlough would be available to different nations and regions of the UK as and when required. Today was furlough is a UK-wide scheme. Yes, we understand that. However, to the Honourable Member for Murray, he responded, if other parts of the UK decide to go into measures that require the furlough scheme, then of course it is available to them. Millions of people need clarification on this from the Prime Minister. Will 80% furlough be available to specific regions beyond the 2nd of December if they need to lock down because of rising infections?
Mr. Speaker, I hesitate to accuse the Honourable Lady of not listening to what I've just said, but I want to repeat that the furlough is a UK-wide scheme. Of course, it will continue to be available to the people of Scotland, and any further elucidation on the details of the entire package of support that this government is bringing for the people of the entire UK, I direct her to what my right honourable.
A potential vaccine for COVID provides us all with hope and development. The Prime Minister has pledged more money for research than any of his predecessors put together to deliver on his...
We're going to leave Prime Minister's question time there, obviously dominated by COVID. And joining us now is our political editor in Westminster. And Beth, certainly seemed to me that the opposition were trying to lay down markers, second-guess what might happen going forward, handling the pandemic.
Yes, that's right, Adam. But first, there was a little bit, wasn't there, on the US election? Keir Starmer asking the Prime Minister there, whatever the result, will the PM join me in saying it's not for a candidate to decide which votes do and don't count or when to stop counting? That was the question to the Prime Minister, deftly dodged by Boris Johnson. As he said to Keir Starmer, we don't comment as a government on the democratic processes of our friends and allies. So dodging that one, a question about Trump's statement that he had already won the election while the votes were still being counted. But then, yes, we were straight into COVID and the national lockdown. There's going to be a debate this afternoon, a 3-hour rules coming in to force at midnight tonight. The Prime Minister will get that vote through the Commons, but how big will the Conservative rebellion be? For Keir Starmer, you're quite right. He was trying to pin the Prime Minister down on what might happen post December the 2nd, asking the Prime Minister, look, you say that the restrictions come to an end, but that Keir Starmer was almost advocating that the Prime Minister should be open to extending that lockdown if that is what the scientific advice recommends. The Prime Minister wouldn't be drawn on that at all. He said he hoped for a very, very different approach, but neither has he boxed himself in by emphatically saying that the lockdown will be lifted either, because he knows only too well that he can't predict what will happen. The hope is that the numbers will go down, but it's just a question of waiting, as Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, said at the weekend, to see how the next few weeks play out. So that was an interesting exchange there. On the politics of it too, the Prime Minister criticising Sir Keir Starmer, saying that he was trying to make political capital out of this crisis. But of course, lots of behind Boris Johnson are very angry with him for politicising the national lockdown and being so ferociously opposed to it, in fact deriding Sir Keir Starmer for advocating it just a few weeks back, only to then implement the policy. So that politically uncomfortable for Boris Johnson and his own party too.
Beth Rigby, thank you very much indeed. We'll be back with you because the debate on the second lockdown is going to start shortly in the House of Commons, and of course we'll have coverage of that. Well, meanwhile, back here in the United States, it's the morning after the night before, and the presidential election is too close to call. President Donald Trump has alleged that electoral fraud is taking place, and he says he's going to take it to the Supreme Court. In reply, the Democratic candidate Joe Biden says he is ready to fight any legal challenge to the election result when it is finally concluded. Well, all eyes are now on the key swing states in the Rust Belt, in particular Pennsylvania. Here, Donald Trump is ahead, but with lots of counting still to be done. Trump has held the Sunshine State of Florida after Mr. Biden lost key parts of the Latino vote. Georgia and North Carolina are still being counted and there for the taking. Better news for the Democrats in Arizona. Joe Biden ahead in the additionally Republican state, and he is projected to win in Minnesota. Our US correspondent Greg Milam has this report.
It wasn't the landslide many had predicted. It may not even be a win. It could be days before we know what it is. But Joe Biden is still projecting confidence he will be the next president.
We feel good about where we are. We really do. I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote, mail-in vote, that it's going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted, every ballot is counted.
It was brief and designed to keep the faithful enthused for what could be a protracted battle. And as Biden was speaking, President was tweeting, confident, but as many expected, casting doubt on the process. We are up big, he wrote, but they're trying to steal the election. We will never let them do it. Votes cannot be cast after the polls are closed. Twitter flagged it for possible misinformation. It was a contentious claim that could end up in the courts. Donald Trump had told us time and again not to write him off. Election night headed for morning, with him again making those disputed claims of wrongdoing.
This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay?
On the streets of Washington, the uncertainty has fed a febrile atmosphere, discontent with Trump and nervousness about which way the country's heading. As we'd suspected all along, it will be those Rust Belt states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin that will decide America's path forward. Biden's supporters remain confident.
This would have been resolved earlier, but, you know, we have to keep the hope alive. I mean, Joe Biden's such a wonderful man. He's such a wonderful ethical. He's going to bring the country, and that's what we're hoping for.
I'm still very positive. Vice President Biden's going to be our next president.
It's going to take a little longer than we thought, and so we're optimistic. You know, we're Americans. We're used to having things quickly. Now we got to be a little more patient.
America's and the world's next 4 years are hanging in the balance.
Postal votes has provoked quite a response from the Biden campaign. A statement this morning said the president's statement is a naked effort to take away the democratic rights of American citizens. If the president makes good on his threat to go to court to try to prevent the proper tabulation of votes, we have legal teams standing by ready to deploy to resist that effort and prevail. Should Donald Trump contest the election result, let's take a look at the process and the players involved. Under the 12th Amendment, Congress is responsible for resolving any election dispute. They do this by casting their own votes for the president and vice president, known as a contingent election. But the Constitution provides that the settlement must first happen within a state's legal system. To avoid Congress getting involved, each state must determine electors to vote on its behalf by the 8th of December, known as the Safe Harbor deadline. The House and the Senate could still jointly object to the outcomes and include the votes from the election results. However, if the House and the Senate do not agree, Democrats would argue the line of succession means the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, should assume the role of acting president. Republicans are unlike that. Ultimately, litigation filed in individual states could eventually be appealed to the Supreme Court. Now that Donald Trump's judicial nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, has been approved as a justice, 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices are Republican appointed, and that could be advantageous to the president. The most likely outcome in the immediate aftermath of the election is a wave of legal challenges over close counts and postal vote deadlines, especially in competitive states such as Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And already both parties have filed dozens of lawsuits in individual states in an attempt to define the rules over how votes are tallied. I think it's also important to note 2 things. One is that legal experts on all sides do not see the basis on which Donald Trump could go directly to the US Supreme Court to dispute the outcome of any election. It is American convention that counting takes place over days, and that has gone on for a very long time indeed. Second point is that looking at what Americans call the math, there is a possibility that there could actually be a tie in electoral votes, 270 to 270, although, of course, 2 states which break down their vote, in the case of Nebraska and Maine, in the Electoral College, will also be focused on closely. But if there were to be a tie, it's not the courts who decide. That would then go back to the US Congress. The Senate would choose a vice president. The House of Representatives would choose the president from the top 3 finishers in the campaign. However, the House of Representatives would not vote represented by a representative. They would vote as blocks of states. And it has to be said, in that case, in both the Senate and House, in most favored position, likely they would be a system if it does. Well, Johnny, now.
Afei obi ojo nso ana na yase anase ne bema mu eye ne ya ene ya dia hodo bebre Dank Natural Healthcare Complex yehwe ni nyina ye sanso massage therapy ye ba be miamiao ama oni padua no agina brane sanso na ye wo gym center ye wo mfidi ni nyina bi wo ho a impom titutumrika hwehwe yasoye e won kran ye wo tabora ye Brembodama Sport ene ye ni Shell filling station no edi animhwe Dank ye adwuma na wotwe ni nyina ejoda kopim efiada eye anopa no wotwe ekopim enwumere nonum sanso na memrenda anopa no wotwe ekopim ewia nomiensa ena afi kwasiada ewia donko ekopim enwumere nonsia Fraying ewo 0244 017556 ana 0266 593330 ana 0553 661585 ana 0501